So I'm a little upset that you guys didn't get a chance to do this in lab. So I'm hoping by doing this example dissection, it would kind of give you a feel of what it would have been like if we were actually doing this in person. So this week we would have been dissecting frogs, and how we would have started out is by creating kind of this barn door pattern over the abdomen of the frog. So you start kind of across where the front legs meet the body, and kind of midway across the middle of the back legs, just like that. And then we would take the scalpel and slit up the center of the frog. It takes a little bit more pressure than you might expect it to. And after this point, sometimes the scissors are rather helpful because there's a layer of tissue just under the epithelial tissue, and those scissors help you kind of get through it. So there you can kind of see that second layer of tissue that I was talking about. Pause it. Okay, so now that you have your flaps of frog, you're going to take your dissection pins and stick them through both layers, the squamous tissue and the internal peritoneal layer, and pin it outward into the pan so that it's out of the way of the organs that you're trying to look at on the individual. The first thing you'll see is these gray lobes that look about where you'd probably expect to see lungs, but that would be where you expect to see lungs in a mammal. Frogs, on the other hand, have a whole lot of liver tissue. This is this gray tissue that you're seeing right here, and there's 3 lobes of it, and in between those lobes there's a gallbladder, kind of hidden right there. That kind of clearish, fluid-filled, kind of translucent sac right there. That's the gallbladder. So if we were to ask you that on an exam, we'd put a pin through here, and we would ask you to identify this structure right here, and we'd be looking for gallbladder. Now, don't forget that even though you see this structure right here, this is the liver and not the lungs. So I'm going to actually take these pieces of liver out because it's easier to see the structures underneath them if I remove them. Sac-like structure you see right here encases the heart, and I'm going to peel back this layer so that you're able to see the heart. Hopefully. It's right up in where you would think his throat would be. Right about here. Normally I encourage you to take the pieces out and take a look at them so you get a good idea of what those structures look like. Again, this is the gallbladder. It's about the size of an English pea. What you see here, these orangey, ribbony structures, we're not talking about mammals, so they're not going to have adipose tissue. Instead, frogs have what we call fat bodies, and they look like kind of just strings throughout the peritoneal cavity. And this is where the frog will store excess fat tissue. They break pretty easily. They come right out. I'm going to get them out of our way too. This is kind of what it looks like. Looking at is the small intestine structure, and if you were to pull this kind of spaghetti string looking stuff out of the way, you will see that it's attached to the large intestine, which is much, much wider than the spaghetti strings looking bit. So this is our small intestine, and this is our large intestine. So this frog is a male, and you can see that the kidney is this kind of pinkish red structure here, and the creamy colored structure kind of nestled inside of it, that is his testy. Sometimes they're not super visible because it depends on what season the frog was killed in. But in this case, our specimen has a really good visible testy. So that's what you would be looking at if you were to see this on a practical. There's a good possibility it won't be on the practical because they're not always super visible. So one of the last structures we have left to take a look at is this big, elongated, wide structure here. It's very, very dense. It's very, very strong. This is the stomach. We found some very interesting things in here dissecting these sometimes. If we look down here, you'll find a very, very stretchy structure. It's kind of creamy colored. This is the urinary bladder. If we were to show you this on an exam, we would stretch it out just like this and pin it off to the side, and we would ask you to identify this structure. Just like that. And we probably won't ask you about these, but if you were curious as to where a frog's lungs actually exist, they're up here, kind of in what you would think would be his shoulder region. These darkish gray, very soft structures here. As you can see, they're not particularly well developed. Frogs don't have well developed lungs like we do as mammals.